And yet, here's something that I think we need to think about. Whenever we consider these possibilities, we need to constantly be mindful of the fact that we love to scare the hell out of a film.
Warning, this is not entertainment.
Hey everybody, welcome to Eschaton. Today I have an interview lined up with two men who are involved in the creation of a recently released documentary that I highly recommend everybody go and watch as soon as possible. It's a profound film. It was just released to streaming and video download on October 22nd. It's won several awards. The film is called From Shock to Awe, A Journey of Hope and Transformation. My guests today are Mitch Schultz, the producer of the film, and Mike Cooley, who is one of the stars of the film. And at its core, what the film is about is basically the role that psychedelics and plant-based or alternative-based medicines can play in healing severe trauma or PTSD, especially in the lives of veterans. So Mike, as you may have kind of put together by now, he is a veteran of both Afghanistan and Iraq. Him and his co-star, I should say, of the film, a guy named Matt Cal, both were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and the film basically just tracks them in their time back home, trying to reintegrate into civilian lives with their families, and just some of the struggles they have. And you get a very intimate and close personal look at the struggles these men go through. I don't want to spoil the film for you, but long story short, they get introduced to some alternative-based treatment through ayahuasca, something that those of you who listen to this podcast should know quite a bit about by now. And the film just documents the transformation in their lives as such. And I think it's profound, not only because of the role that it's, obviously having in people's lives, but also what it's doing in terms of causing medical institutions and investors to take a serious glance at the role that this can play in treatment going forward. So people like Tim Ferriss, popular podcaster, in the spotlight for some of his work as an angel investor in the past. He's kind of pushed all of his chips into the research of psychedelics and hallucinogenic-based plant medicines to basically treat things like PTSD and trauma. So he's all in, working with Johns Hopkins Research Institute to push this research forward and try to get things like psilocybin and MDMA approved for trial use and possibly down the road public consumption. So exciting things are happening in this space, and films like this are really shining a light on the good that it can do and the positive impact it can have on a personal level. Mitch Schultz, you may be familiar with Mitch as a producer through some of his previous work. He was behind DMT, The Spirit Molecule, which has kind of become a cult classic over the past few years. Still available on Netflix. Highly recommend you check it out if you haven't seen it. That one was that was the film that kind of caused me to reassess my presuppositions and biases about some of these things, and really kicked in the door and sent me down a rabbit hole of exploration. So I would start there. If you haven't seen DMT, The Spirit Molecule, check it out. Mitch was behind that work, as I said, so you know that he's got the credentials and he knows his material well. And From Shock to Awe is really a continuation of the themes and the concepts we begin to explore in that film. So with that, let's jump into the interview. Before we do, I'll just read a brief summary that's posted on all of the public-facing websites and on the IMDb page for the film. From Shock to Awe asks, how do we heal our deepest wounds? Our film is an intimate and raw look at the transformational journey of two combat veterans suffering from severe trauma as they abandon pharmaceuticals to seek relief through the mind-expanding world of psychedelics. Recent scientific research coupled with a psychedelic renaissance reveals that these substances can be used to heal PTSD, for individuals and their families. Beyond the personal stories, From Shock to Awe also raises fundamental questions about war, the pharmaceutical industry, and the U.S. legal system. So hopefully that's enough to pique your interest. Go out and check out the film. You can stream it on iTunes. You can download it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this interview as much as I enjoyed putting it together. These men are a wealth of information and just really great guys to talk to. And I think that'll come through in this podcast. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon. Mitch and Mike, welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hey,
Thanks.
hello, thank you.
First thing I want to say, guys, is just wow. I watched Shock and Awe a few days ago in the evening in my hotel room after work, and I was not emotionally prepared for it. It's powerful, and some of it resonates with themes not only that I've talked about on this podcast before, but personal experiences just in the last year or so with ayahuasca and DMT. So before we dive into the meat and the potatoes of the content, I wanted to kind of get a feel. I want the audience to get a feel for your background, Mike, and kind of just the journey that led you down this road. And people will know, having listened to the introduction of this podcast, that you have a military background, and that had some effects on you that lingered far beyond the battlefield. So could you just kind of give people an introduction as to who you are and your story?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, my name's Mike, and man, it's been a long road. It really has been. A lot of times the memories don't come back, but I served almost 12 years in the military, 11 and a half, pretty much until I was medically retired. I was a military policeman and a canine handler, paratrooper. I love the military. I was gung ho for it. I joined after 9/11 to serve my country. I wanted to make sure that my nephews didn't have to live in a world filled with war, and unfortunately, that's where we're at. But that's a side point. It was really really bizarre, actually, how I ended up all the way onto this plant medicine. I was completely straight-laced growing up, straight edge, whatever you want to call it. I was a dare kid. I didn't believe that drugs were good because we were told they're bad. And I bought it all hook, line, and sinker, joined the military, became a military policeman, upheld the regulations, and even worked a narcotics dog, searching for drugs while I was stationed in Germany. Cannabis, mostly, oddly enough. And my wife was actually the first one to start using cannabis, Brooke, and she's in the movie as well. She's in there, and she undergoes MDMA treatment. And her therapist at the time, addictions counselor, actually recommended for her to look into medical cannabis. And I was still active duty at the time, and I laughed it off. I thought exactly what I was told. It's bad for you. It's terrible. And I was sent to Germany shortly thereafter, and spent almost 2 years separated from my wife and my kids while she underwent some of the toughest times of her life. She was addicted to meth and coke, and attempted suicide. Just struggling with her own issues. And during that time, we were separated. And I actually started doing some research. That therapist sparked an interest in my mind, and I started looking into cannabis while I was still working as an narc dog handler. Excuse me. And oddly enough, I never received any training on the effects of the drugs that we were searching for on people. We just searched for them. And I started looking up and finding, anecdotal evidence on the internet about cannabis working for just a whole host of things, a lot of which my wife was dealing with. So when I came back, when I was sent back to the Warrior Transition Unit, we talked with the therapist a little bit more about cannabis, and Brooke started on it. And man, it was night and day. She was on a whole slew of psych meds. She had multiple stints in a mental health clinic, inpatient. They always had to change her medications and monitor her, and it was a struggle. But she actually was able to, on her own, wean herself off of the psych meds until she was completely and solely on cannabis, and was happier, more active, more devoted mother, more self-caring on the cannabis than she ever was on the psych meds. And that did it for me. As soon as I got my DD-214, I started using cannabis, and slowly, gradually came off of my psych meds. I don't recommend that, coming off of psych meds on your own, but that's what we did, and I'll never look back. The cannabis led us to friends in the dispensaries, who eventually led to a connection that got us tickets to be veteran representatives at the Boulder Can Awards. I believe that was 2015. And so Brooke and I went to that, and there we met a gentleman, a Marine named Ryan LeCompte. And Ryan had actually used ayahuasca in the jungles of Peru, and that was documented. And he told me all about it, and that, this might be where you need to be headed towards, because at the time cannabis was helping me a great deal, but it wasn't getting me beyond my PTSD or my depression, my anger. It just kind of allowed me to be a better human and to live a little bit more functional. I started going downhill pretty quickly, right around 2014, about a year after I got out. It was when I thought, I've been straight edge all this time, and I've believed hook, line, and sinker everything anybody in a position of authority has told me. And up until now, I've believed it, and now I realize that it's falling out from underneath me. And there's lies hidden within this, because cannabis works. So what else have I been lied to about? And I lost my faith. I lost my faith in myself as a man. What did I do in the military? Was it any, everything just fell apart. What am I doing? And it was incredible that I ran into Ryan LeCompte, because through him, he introduced me to Janine and Luke. And they subsequently thereafter, did the interviews and decided that I was a fit for the film. And here we are.
That's an awesome story, man.
That's a long one. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm a bit of a storyteller. Right?
Don't apologize, man. That's the content we want to get into, and I want to circle back in more detail, into not only your military background in a moment here, but also the specific experience that you had the first time with ayahuasca. But before I do, Mitch, I wanted to ask you, what was the progenesis for this film, or the seed that you guys noticed that you said, we need to shine some light on this? Where did that start, and how did you get involved with the project?
Yeah, well, let me back up a little bit. I guess from a personal perspective, I was kind of just the opposite of Mike. I was pretty reckless at a young age. I started using substances at about 14 and psychedelics at 14, but at that time it was extremely frivolous, and wasn't with a whole lot of care or kind of self-development in mind at all. And although I didn't serve in the military, I had a lot of trauma growing up. And it was in 2002, when I was in graduate school, that I tried DMT for the first time. And within a 10-minute experience, everything changed, as you hear pretty regularly. It put a lot of things in question, like Mike was saying, about what I knew, not only about myself, but reality and the entire universe. So it set me down a road to start researching about these substances, particularly DMT to start with, and then went on to make DMT the spirit molecule. And with that whole process, started really thinking about who I was, how I was moving through the world, what my relationships were like, thinking about life experiences that had led up to that point. Because these substances give you, they're not the magic bullet, as we say regularly, but they give you a step back outside of yourself so you can start to evaluate what some of those are and then piece things back together. So, through that process and putting out DMT and doing a couple other projects, I was introduced to Janine and Luke myself right before they started shooting the film in Austin, and we just hit it off, and they said, this is what we're getting ready to do. And I said, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. And here and there we'd touch base, and I guess in beginning of 2018, they reached back out and said, we've got a finished film, and I watched it and was blown away. I just want to say thanks to Mike and Matt and Aime and Brooke as well, because it takes a lot of courage to put yourself in front of a camera and open yourself up the way that they've done and shown the world their personal journeys. That is very commendable, and I think it shows on the screen. I was really impressed with what Luke and Janine had done, and I said, let me come on board and help out in any way I can. So we started getting it out there, and we're just pleased to now have it out there for the entire world to see, because I do believe this message could help a lot of people. There's too much suffering going on out there and a lot of unnecessary suffering, and I think the time has come. The world is at a chaotic place, but there's some things that are opening up, and there's a lot of potential here, and I think it will have a lot of impacts, not only for individuals, but the culture and society in general. So that's kind of the long and short of all of that as well, but I'm just grateful to be on the project and be here with you guys. Yes, so thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that synopsis. I want to
love you, Mitch.
I love you too, brother.
One of the first things I realized watching the film is just how authentic it is. Like, that there's no fake emotion involved. Mike and Matt, and your wives, it's just an authentic. You almost forget that the cameras are there. It's a real picture into your lives and just going on this journey with you. And I want to jump for just a couple minutes. I don't know if it's a hard thing or a positive thing for you, Mike, to relive, that first experience of the ayahuasca, whether, it was an anxious feeling or, a hopeless feeling or an exciting feeling. But from your perspective, I want to go a little deeper and ask you, what was it like to actually have that, quote unquote, psychedelic experience for the first time? Because there's a profound moment in the film after you are, kind of debriefing or having like a heart-to-heart conversation with the folks you're with afterwards, where to me, it was the most profound and powerful moment of the film, where you were talking about energy coming through your finger, and you said, that was my trigger finger. You couldn't figure out why you had all that energy coming through that part of your body, and then it realized like you had used that hand for violence and, in the service of the protection of your country. And now it was telling you, you took the message that, no more. Like, now these hands will be used for good, for peace, for restoring and not taking life. And, that hit me hard. And I want to ask you, what was it like in the moment, not knowing how the ayahuasca would affect you, what lessons the plant medicine would teach you, but actually experiencing it, how did it compare to what you had learned as a dare kid growing up and what actually happened?
Great question.
Oh, man. I remember when I went there, it was a last-ditch effort. The week prior, I had been on my knees in the closet with my H&K 45 pressed against my temples. And I told myself that if I went there and it didn't work, then I was going to come back and finish. So I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't really care. I just kind of went there going, you know what? I'm just going to, whatever happens is going to happen. And that first night, I smelled the ayahuasca in the cup, and man, I wanted to throw up just with the first whiff. It is potent. Whew.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, you know what? I came here for this. I'm not gonna half do it. So I just slammed it back, and I was like, whatever it tastes like, it's going down. And then I just sat with it, and I sat for a good while. We were all sitting in chairs around the fire, and Chris had said, as you begin to feel the medicine, go ahead and get up, and you can move away from the fire and lay down on your mats out in the grass and, look up at the night sky, if you'd like to do that. And I'm sitting there, and I was kind of starting to rock back and forth like this, because it felt like I just had this lead ball in my stomach, just this lead weight. And I'm sitting there, and I'm rocking back and forth. I'm looking around at everybody, and people are getting up and getting up and getting up and getting up. And pretty soon, I'm one of the last few people sitting there, and I'm not feeling really anything. And Chris came up to me, and he said, Mike, are you feeling the medicine? I said, I don't really know. And so he went and got me a booster, a second cup, and had me drink that. And I sat with it and rocked and sat with it and rocked. And more people started getting up from the circle. And I'm starting to think, well, fuck. I was, at that point, I was like, well, there's my answer. This isn't going to work for me. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. And I remember I looked at the fire, and I saw these faces in the fire. And it was the first time I'd ever seen any type of a hallucination or, anything I could even compare to something like that. And I wasn't afraid. I wanted to attack them. I wanted to jump into the fire and strangle them. I had so much hate in me that I saw these faces. I didn't even know who they were, and I wanted to attack them. And I then, for a split second, I went, if I jump in the fire, that'll hurt me. But everything within me wanted to just attack them. And Chris came over, and he said, Mike, how are you doing? Are you, something to the likes of, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Are you feeling the medicine? And I was like, I don't know. I see these faces. I don't know. And he's like, all right, I got something for you. And he came back with a rapé pipe, which is shamanic stuff. And it's used to clear blockages. It's used to help meditate, many different uses. It's incredibly strong and incredibly potent. He put the rapé tube on my left nostril, and you're supposed to do the left and then refill the pipe and do the right. And what you do is it's a long tube, like bamboo or wood or bone, hollowed out on the inside, and you fill it with this rapé powder, and then you self-apply it with a V-shaped applicator, or somebody else blows it up your nose. And Chris hit my left nostril with it, and it was like he shot a bolt of white lightning into my head, which blew the back of my skull out into the universe, is the only way I can describe it. It was the most brilliant, blinding flash of white that just enveloped everything, and this searing, intense pain at the back of my skull that literally felt like it blew it out into the universe. That was like, it just, and I could almost, it was the most odd sensation, because through what I felt was this just pain opening in the back of my head to the universe, I could almost see the stars and the galaxies within my vision. It kind of filtered in and washed out the light to where I was looking at just this star field of galaxies. And then I fell forward to my knees and began purging and pounding the ground and beating the ground with my fist, and just punching it and beating it as hard as I could. And I remember just digging and clawing into the ground and burying myself, literally burying my face and my head into the ground. And then I just stayed there with my head in the ground, and I'm breathing sand and dirt and stuff into my nose. And I didn't care. I was just face in the ground. And I just started screaming. And this just deep, guttural, demonic scream came out of me that didn't even sound like me. And this vibration of anger and darkness came from the core of where I felt that lead ball in my pit of my stomach, and it came and it rose up out of me as this guttural scream was coming out. And then as it came out of me into the ground, the scream changed. And I could literally hear it come out of me and separate from me, and it was screaming back at me then as it went into the earth and was absorbed back into the earth. And it like literally this darkness, this anger, this energy came out of me with this scream and into the earth. And I sat back, and I had vomit coming off of my face. I had sand in my beard. I had sand in my eyes. And everybody came to me and started pouring water on my face and patting my back and telling me to breathe, because I hadn't breathed at that point. I had just let this scream out to the bottom of my lungs, to the exhaustion of every bit of air that I could squeeze out of me. And then I was just back like this, staring up at the sky. And I smiled. And I breathed in. And it was like the first breath of my life. And everybody was there to care for me and wash the sand out of my eyes and wipe my face off. And everything felt new. And I felt as if all of the weight that I had been carrying had been taken away and just lifted off of my shoulders. And I didn't even have a chance to really think about how, fantastic an experience this was. It just was. And then it was. And then I was in it. And then it was like, okay, well, everything is different now. Everything.
It's funny how the medicine almost seems to know what each individual person needs. Not two people will have the same experience. You could be in the same room doing the exact same thing, the same process, same ritual, but yet you'll have your own unique experience. It's almost as if it knows what you need as an individual to achieve that healing. And almost everybody has that positive experience. And I sat in my first ayahuasca ceremony a while back, but what happened there was inherently different than, the experience that you just recounted for us, Mike. But I was also in a room with 7 or 8 other people, and they all had their own unique experience. But the beautiful thing was, the end of it, we all found what we were looking for. Like it satisfied what we needed in that moment. And not everybody would say it was like a quote unquote positive thing. Some people dealt with very challenging things, but it was what they needed. There were even a couple of veterans there. Mine was more of a classic, what I've learned since is like the classic ayahuasca experience where I met what seemed to be some sort of a serpent, as strange as it might sound. But I met this serpent female entity, like the mother ayahuasca, as they say. And I had a classic, encounter like that, and it was profound. Like, to this day, it's profound. But I was there with other people who had totally different experiences, nothing like that. And all of us, during our circle in the morning when we kind of debriefed, had a story to tell, and it was impressive. And Mitch, I wanted to, you said you started kind of getting into psychedelics as a teenager.
Yeah.
So you're probably the most experienced of the three of us here. I wanted to ask you, have you found any enlightenment or insight there, in the sense that it doesn't seem to be like a standard or uniform experience? That most psychedelics or plant medicines seem to kind of meet you where you are and give you what you need. I found that to be interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times we like to kind of imbue that property within the plant or the psychedelic. But what I've come to understand, at least for myself, is that I think we all have an innate ability within us to heal ourselves. We're learning more and more about how trauma is actually stored in the body. And it's not just a mental construct or a story, but without sounding new agey, but literally scientifically, it embeds itself into our nervous system. It creates patterns of movement, even the way that we develop and grow and the way our body moves. And kind of getting back to the movie a second, that other big part for me with Mike was the look on his face after that first ayahuasca experience, because his entire being, the way that he was carrying his face and the brow being, tightened up, was gone. And I think what had happened there is resetting that energetic system, his nervous system. And I think that's what's happening with anybody that goes through one of these large experiences. But I do believe it's an innate experience or innate property that we have within us. And we know, whether we know it or not, ourselves better than anybody else. We're very good at hiding that from ourselves. But once the kind of the key is introduced, the psychedelic, whatever that might be, the compound, we get back to that core sense of self. And without all the layers of trauma, without all the stories, without all the years and years of building up what we think is reality, it goes back to this kind of core level of being, which, as they say in the movie, is love, is probably the best way to describe that. And it's an amazing experience. And
what has been the fallout of the film, guys, or like the post-release experience? Because now you're starting to see in the mainstream places, credible places like Johns Hopkins Research Facility is actually doing some research into the effects of psilocybin and MDMA on PTSD treatment. Like, you're seeing stuff like that pop up more and more, and it seems like you guys kind of were ahead of the curve, right? It's just catching up with you, what you've already known. And I'm curious, like, what's the fallout now? Are you finding like more popularity and more interest now, like a year or two later, than you expected, or what's it been like?
Shit, I've been thinking a lot, because it's been almost a decade since we released the Spirit Molecule. And these conversations weren't even happening. But now you're seeing it in the New York Times, like you mentioned, all these different research facilities. 2021, it looks like MDMA is going to be approved by the FDA. They've got a fast track with MAPS.
That's awesome.
And there's just again, so many people out there suffering. We can't deny people getting better. The pharmaceuticals aren't doing it. Our traditional talk therapy is not doing it. And people are sick and tired, literally, and are going out and finding their own way to heal themselves. And it's happening more and more, and it's happening not just in this country, but around the planet. And people are coming out saying, wow, I'm better. I can take care of myself. I can take care of my family. I love myself. And it's not only needed, but it's happening. And it is amazing how quickly it's happening. Especially when we have so many veterans coming back that have had to go sacrifice themselves for this country or for whatever cause we want to call it. And then they come back and they're not getting what they need. And more than anything, they're starting to get it, whether it's just a little step with cannabis or it goes to ayahuasca or MDMA. it's happening. And I would think that, over the next 10 years, I don't see a full legalization, but I definitely see some new framework set up so people can go start healing themselves. And we still don't know a lot about how this stuff's working either. That's the other, kind of interesting thing. It all seems it's very shamanic or mystical or this or that, but it's working. And that's the most important thing. People are getting help.
Yeah, amen to that, man. Shit, I remember when the Spirit Molecule came out, it seemed so fringe. Like I watched it on Netflix, and I remember telling my friends about it. And these are pretty open-minded guys, and even some of them were like, "I don't know about this." And here we are, just a few years later. It's so encouraging to see like the progress and the evolution we've made as a society. And just to psilocybin being legalized in Colorado and Washington, and seems like it's going to be the norm moving forward. That's encouraging to me because we're getting off of these dangerous medications that are being designed in pharmaceutical laboratories, and we're moving back toward the earth, toward natural remedies. And I guess that kind of brings me full circle to the present day. I'm really curious to know, as we begin to wrap up, Mike, what life is like for you now, brother, because you mentioned that if this didn't work, this was a last ditch effort for you. And I should preface by saying I'm happy that it worked and that you're here with us.
I am too. I love seeing that smile.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen the film, you got to see it. I mean, oh man, Mike and Matt are just great, and you feel like an intimate bond with them and their families by the end of it. But yeah, where are you now, man? Like, what's the journey been like? Since this drastic shift?
Growth, a lot of growth. And as Mitch, spoke earlier, those layers, is constantly working on peeling back those layers of trauma and those layers of, this is who I think I should be, or this is who I think I am because the world's told me, or, and we need to remember that these psychedelics, these entheogens, these amazing plant medicines are not a cure-all. At the core, we are still human, and we forget what they teach us. We forget what we remember when we've taken them, and gradually over time, as the wariness of life and every day grinds down on us, bills and family life and, ups and downs. One of the greatest things that I have taken away from and have incorporated into my life with plant medicines is humility and paying attention to the loved ones around me when they're calling attention to the fact that I'm starting to forget and I'm starting to fall back into, this life is so difficult and so frustrating and so overwhelming. It's never gotten to a severity of where it was before since I've had ayahuasca. I've never since had a suicidal thought afterwards. I get depressed, I get sad, but I get happy. I have the full range of human emotions, and they're in balance. And when they start to slip a little bit off kilter, a little more off balance, then I know that it's time to go back to a ceremony. I know that it's time to work on peeling back another layer of trauma. I have something else that needs to be worked with, and I do that. Instead of regressing and falling into a pit of despair and self-hatred and self-neglect like I used to do. Now I lean on my family. Now I look for help. Now I talk to my friends. Now I do positive things that facilitate growth in my life and in my family. Case in point, yesterday was a very chaotic day. Our dog cut her foot on the metal landscape edging in the backyard. I had to take her into the, vet ER. It was almost a $600 bill. My kids we're homeschooling, and we're trying to catch up on that. But then this comes into play, and we've got bills over here, and it's life. But in the evening, Brooke called me. She's working out of town right now. She called me, asked me how things are going, and I lost it. I was like, rah! Like, I'm drowning. It's so chaotic. Like, today just sucked. Like, ah! Mm-hmm. And she did the best thing she could have ever done. She said, Mike, you need to go to bed. You need to get some sleep. I love you. Get some rest, and I'll talk to you in the morning. Mm. And I did. I went to bed, and I woke up, and I realized, you know what? Yesterday was chaotic, but my reaction was kind of chaotic too. Mm. And that was a good lesson for me, that I still have work to be done. I'm still human, just because I'm in a film about, ayahuasca and this incredible plant medicine and how much it changed my life. I don't want anyone to get a false sense of this will cure every problem that I have from that point on in my life. Because when I came back after my first ayahuasca ceremony and everything was rainbows and dewdrops for about a month, and then it slowly wasn't anymore. Yeah. And I started wondering why, and I started getting frustrated and upset. It was the realization of the fact that we have to continually remember. We have to find a way to incorporate what we learned in our lives and not forget it, and not go back to our old patterns, not go back to our old ways of life. Because if we do that, we can completely forget what the medicine taught us, and we can go back to our old story. It's as easy as that. We have that choice, that free will. So it's a daily, continual practice for me now to remember and to work with the medicines, and to, every couple of months to go seek out a ceremony to go and use the medicines again, in a safe and respectful manner, and to peel back another layer. Yeah. It's a continual growth process, but one thing that I was told during one of the ceremonies, in a loving and gentle and supportive yet firm way, was that the work is never done. And we can't just, kick up our heels and sit back on our butt and say, oh, well, everything's great now. We have to come back to our lives after we've seen these revelations or heard these revelations, or whatever we've experienced that changed us. We have to come back into our lives knowing that we have work to be done, but to do it with love and with joy, and not with a hatred or a determination or a feeling of that it's a pressure, because it's ultimately a change for good. For everyone. Yeah. I see when I work on myself, and when I have my strong, good days, I see the effect, I see the ripple around me, through my wife, through my kids, through my family, through my friends around me. If I give love out, it comes back to me. If I wake up and go, everything is against me, then that's how everything feels, and everything, appears to be. Yeah.
Well said,
bro. Long story short, the work is never done, but it's a joyful and pleasureful and joy-filled life now, to be continuing to work with it and seeing things get better.
Well, the film is called From Shock to Awe, A Journey of Hope and Transformation. And powerful stuff, guys. Powerful. I mean, I did not expect it to hit me on such a personal level when I watched it. And I just want to say, whatever you guys do in the future, wherever your lives take you, this journey takes you, I'm sure you're going to continue being authentic to yourself, but I hope you continue to create good, work that is necessary and important for the time, and that you continue to spread that message of love and the humility that you gathered from it, Mike, which comes through so authentically in you. It encourages me as well to just stay focused on what matters. And I'm just more than appreciative for you guys taking the time to chat with me. Mitch, where can people go to learn more about your work and to get more involved, educated?
Well, first off, thanks to Mike. I'm blown away and inspired by this man every day, and
Mitch,
it's so genuine and it's beautiful to see. And although it can be a challenge and it's an ongoing process, you wear it well, brother. So thank you. As far as our work, you can go to mitchschultz.net, SCHULTZ, and also thespiritmolecule.com. And of course, from shocktoawe.com. We've got a lot of extra content on there, different organizations. There's a lot of things you can kind of go down the proverbial rabbit hole to learn more about all this stuff. And, we just, hopefully I'm speaking for Mike as well, but we're here to help, man. We found some joy ourselves, and that's why we do what we do. And we want to, if we can touch one other person out there, it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we'll link to your work in the notes. And again, just want to say thank you to you guys. And just keep up the good work. And looking forward to seeing what you come up with in the future, Mitch. And Mike, pleasure to hear your story, brother. And I wish you and your family all the best in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Mike.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Take care.
And anytime you introduce fear into a logical process, whether it's linear, spherical, or otherwise, you're going to distort things.